somewhere in there. Is that when you started?
Oh, no, I've been there 41 years.
Man.
Yeah. Yep, I'm what they call a lifer.
Awesome. Well, Kim, did you have any other thing? Kim is obviously the person that was able to contact you. And
Yeah.
did you have anything else to say, Kim? You got your mute button on. I guess the answer to that is no.
Okay.
I'm glad you're able to join us, Sharon, in such short notice, and looking forward to hear some information about COVID-19 and weather forecasting. And I know I enjoy watching you guys from your home, so.
Yeah, well, it's got its pros and cons, that's for sure. I don't know how much you guys know about what we used to do before COVID-19, and certainly I'm not much of a speaker, so I prefer to think of this as just sort of having a conversation with you all, because I'm sure you all have stories too. You know, you had a cancellation today, so you got stuck with me. But anyway, as far as what we used to do, everybody was at the station. Everybody came in every day. We had different shifts all the time, but everybody was in the building, at least at some point during the day. So that was the newsroom, that was the reporters, that was the producers, that was the editors. We have sales staff that's in there, creative services upstairs, the people that are responsible for making ads and promos and things like that. So, and then last but not least, the production department, which works out of the control room. So there's a lot of coming and going. There's a lot of people all sharing ideas at once, a lot of yelling towards the end of the day as we get closer to deadline. And so this really has been a change, and I'm sure everybody's got their own story about where they were and what they were doing when this all started. But my husband and I had tried to sneak in one last vacation down in Cancun. And at the time, there was only one case somewhere in Vermont, and there were no cases that we knew of down in Mexico. So we decided we'd have time in order to get down there. And of course, as soon as we got down there, we have some friends down there, Rosario, and she told us, oh, of course we have cases down here. You have any idea how many Chinese and Italian tourists that are coming all the time? Thousands and thousands, and nobody's being checked. And there was nothing at the airport to see what was going on with that. So we immediately became a little bit nervous about that, because there were in fact a lot of Chinese and Italian tourists there. And that's where, at that point, the disease was. And then about 4 days into the vacation, I got a CDC notification saying anybody who's high risk should not fly anymore. That was like the first little thing that they put out. And, you know, it's no secret, I'm no spring chicken. I have asthma as well. So we'd cut our vacation short in order to come back. And the day I came back, Gray Television, which is the company that owns us now, put out an email to everybody that if you've been out of the country, no matter what country you've been to, you can't come to work for 2 weeks. You have to isolate at home. So we immediately came back and went into isolation. And it was that week that things really started to happen. The next 2 weeks after that, the things really started to happen quickly as far as things being shut down. As you probably know, UVM had a basketball game, a championship basketball game that I decided not to go to, but our news director went to it. And that was the game that had an outbreak at the game. And that was the last basketball game that was played before everything shut down. So our news director was there. We have all our news meetings in his office, which is a fairly small area. And he ended up coming down with flu-like symptoms. It was too early to get tested. At that point, the only people that got tested were people that really needed to be hospitalized because they just didn't have enough tests. So he got sick, our assistant news producer got sick, and there was about 5 other people in the newsroom that got sick. Eventually, we were able to start doing some testing, and those came out COVID positive. One of our news photographers was COVID positive. Somebody in creative services, which was upstairs, was COVID positive. And the part that scared our general manager the most was somebody in our production department was COVID positive, because they were all starting to try to figure out how everybody can work from home and what it takes. Because everybody's got some pretty fancy equipment that they need to work with. So that was a matter of buying a lot of equipment and getting everybody set up in a really quick amount of time. So while I was home during my 2 weeks, I got a couple of boxes on my front door steps that the general manager had dropped off for me. And, you know, in it was a laptop, a TV monitor, and directions that I was supposed to download this Splashtop app, which actually gives me access to my big fancy weather computer that's in the weather office. So I figured out how to get set up from here. He also had to get all the reporters set up from where they are so that they weren't coming into the station. So everybody's camera equipment was either kept at home or they put a separate entrance in the back for just camera equipment so that they wouldn't be coming through the building in order to get it. Live shots became either out in the field or from the reporters' homes, as you probably saw. And we needed to minimize the number of people in the building because we already had 3 positive cases that we knew of and probably more like 8 that were never tested. So we could have easily have just sort of gone off the air if enough people had gotten sick, and that's not something that we wanted to do. So he tried to get as many people working out of the building as possible. No more than 2 people in the studio, you've probably noticed. In the evenings, that's Celine and Darren. In the morning, it's Gary and one of the anchors. The other anchor reports from home. There's no way we could all work in the weather office because we have 1 weather computer and 2 other desktop computers, and we all use the same computers. And it's a small space. There's no way. There's like a foot between me and Gary when we're all in there, and there's a foot between me and Dan when the 3 of us are in there. It's a really tight space. So Dan and I work from home. Gary wanted to work from the station, didn't want to deal with setting up everything at home if he didn't have to. So he's the one person from the weather department that works Monday through Friday in the weather office, so he can get it clean and feel safe that nobody else is messing with the computers. And then Dave does it from the station as well. So there's no 2 people that are crossing paths in the weather office. So it was, I'm glad I had the 2 weeks that they sort of told me that I couldn't work because it took me that long to get things set up and get things figured out. I think I actually did go on the air before the end of the 2 weeks because I did have things sort of set up and we were ready to go. But the control room was the most challenging part. And we did, as I mentioned, we did have 1 case in production. But they sanitized the control room, and what they had to do is they had to split up the control room to different parts of the building. You know, you can't move the control room to somebody's house, but they could split it up in the building. So now there's only 1 person in the control room. And the producer, instead of being up next to the director, the producer, they ended up moving that equipment downstairs into where we used to have a coffee machine a few years ago, into basically a little closet type area. So the producer is down there. Darren and Celine are both working in the station, but only one of them's working in the newsroom. The other person is working on a computer in the editing station so that they're not crossing paths too much. And really everything got changed around. How long we're going to be doing it, we don't really know. Kind of like the governor is doing it, he sort of extends it month by month, depending on what's going on. But we got a pretty good scare early on at how quickly it started spreading through the TV stations. So, you know, they don't want to run that risk again. So I suspect it's going to be a little bit longer. So how many of you are working from home? Any hands? Just one? And a couple more? How do you all like it?
I've been doing it for 20 years, so not much of a change here.
Not much of a change? Is it new for everybody?
And I've never liked it.
And you've been doing it for 20 years?
Yeah.
Well, for me, there's pros and cons. I mean, I miss everybody. I miss the interaction. And, you know, of course, there's Zoom meetings and we're constantly texting each other and so forth, but it's definitely not the same as actually being there. I love my commute. You know, it's nice to, when I get off the air, to just snap my laptop shut and I can go have dinner, and there you are. So there's some benefits to that too. And doing things like this, I mean, I would not have been able to drive down to Ludlow in the middle of the day and chat with you all if I was working out at the station. So how do you like your Zoom meetings for Rotary? Does it work?
Yeah, it does. It does actually work, and we're able to get, you know, speakers like yourself that you say you know you probably wouldn't have time in the day to drive 2 hours back for a 45-minute hour meeting.
Right.
But you know, I was curious where the question is does do you see this changing? Do you, as far as in the news capacity or I mean, as far as the media itself, do you think, you know, once everything's clear, well, however that will look,
Right.
do you feel that there are certain things that you guys have taken on as, you know, as probably the lead station in the state, that are gonna change, from your meetings to your production to how you do things?
I'm very curious about that too, and I think we all are kind of wondering, you know, what's going to be permanent changes and what isn't. I know for one thing, now that I'm set up from home, and now that so many people are set up from home, there may be a little bit less of the colds flying around, because nobody, you know, just regular colds, because nobody wanted to use we have combined time off. And so whether you're sick or you're on vacation, it's the same amount of time that you have. So of course, nobody wants to use their vacation time, what they consider their vacation time, to come in if they just have a little bit of a cold. So this way, I think people can work from home, and probably will, maybe not all the time, but it gives you the option to not go in and infect everybody if you've got some other kind of a bug when winter rolls around, and be able to keep working. So I suspect at least some of it will still be being used for various reasons. And how lucky are we that this happened with the technology that we have? Because, you know, if this was the 90s or something, you know, we were already doing live shots with cell packs. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, there used to be a photographer and a reporter every time you went out, because the equipment was so heavy, you needed at least 2 people to just carry it to get somewhere. Now everything's so small, you know, it's a lot more nimble. We used to have a satellite truck in order to be able to go live. Now we just have a little backpack that's a cell pack that gets into a cell signal, and we can go live from almost anywhere. I'm set up using my personal phone to Skype into the control room, and I'm using the iPad in order to call in order to get my IFB, the earpiece, so I can communicate with the director and so forth. And, you know, if this had happened before all that stuff existed, it would have been a real different situation, I think, for all of us.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Sharon? Is that a no? You can go like that. This would be a no. And then Tom Harris, all the way from beautiful Plymouth, Vermont.
Well, I'll chime in. I've been working from home since March 16th, and I've actually logged on every day. And I agree with you, Sharon. The commute is wonderful. The only thing is it's sort of a double-edged sword. I'm so fortunate, as we all are, to be able to isolate in such a beautiful environment. And really, I'm not giving up anything. You know, I have an iPad, an iPhone, and a laptop. So my communications are as good, and it's going to make me rethink, you know, where and when I want to travel and how I want to do my retirement, because this just means I'm as mobile as I want to be. Our organization is 200,000 people, of which David Ladd is a part. 180,000 are successfully working at home, and the revenue is fine, and the service is fine. So, you know, I think one of the long-term trends is you're going to see some major reductions in office space. You're already hearing it in New York City. There's like huge, like basically furniture sales, as office buildings are just empty.
Wow. Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's definitely some pros to it. Do you think it hampers the creativity at all when you don't have the people all in a group being able to
Yeah.
bounce ideas off each other?
Yes, and it's also, I'm not as productive because there's too many distractions. I mean, my daughter happens to be away this week, but you know, there's no doubt that somebody walking through the room it really is a distraction, and also being able to go over to a colleague and confer face to face other than having to do it by phone. There's a certain value added to that I'm not getting. So I find myself being less efficient. But on the same token, there's no travel back and forth to see clients, so I have more time, so I'm getting everything done. It's just, you know, I don't see it as a new long-term reality for the human race. I think it's unsustainable.
Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of the opposite for me because there's more people at work, and I'm more likely, people often stop into the weather office and say, well, we have a very open floor plan to begin with. And the coffee machine used to be just outside the weather office, which was bad luck for us for getting our work done, because people would come down, get a cup of coffee, and then wander into the weather office and want to know what the weather was going to be, and then stand there and chat for a while. So
see, that doesn't happen in certain businesses. Since the 1980s, there's been a saying in corporate America: if there's 3 people at the coffee machine, they're trying to start a union, break it up.
well, it's a very sociable place, where here, I mean, the thing that I do like is I can be working and I can go start a load of laundry, get right back to it. You know, I can multitask and get things done around here that I wouldn't do if I was at work. But I do miss the people, but there's pros and cons to both situations, and we do what we got to do.
That's it. Do we have a Lisa from the Sunshine Room?
I'm in education, so I teach preschool. So I've not been working since March,
Wow.
and the discussion is no more snow days because we can all do this from home. So
Oh no, really? Are they talking about that?
yeah,
Oh no,
yeah,
the poor kids.
right? The poor teachers.
And the poor teachers, yes. Oh my gosh, that used to be the best part of winter, was waiting to see if you had a snow day and how exciting that was.
I think Rhode Island has actually made it official.
That's a terrible state of affairs.
I know.
So you
Top of everything, we've lost snow days.
I know, that's terrible. So how, you haven't gone back at all yet? How old are the kids that you work with?
I work with 3-year-olds. So I've done a little bit online, and that, you know, it's just not developmentally appropriate. I am working part-time now, planning for fall. And, you know, that it really, the struggle for me is, you know, going back into work with, you know, I mean, it's very common knowledge that preschool is a petri dish.
Right.
And, you know, that it's not developmentally appropriate to be 6 feet apart, to be wearing, you know, masks and all of that. So it's you know, there's a whole other concern.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I thought that even for those of us that work in other businesses, if we go back to work in the office and everybody's kids go back to daycare and school, I mean, every year, September, October, that's when all the viruses started floating around, because the kids went back to school and they gave it all to each other, and then they gave it to their parents, and their parents came in. So yeah, there was usually about a month or so delay when everybody starts getting sick at work. So it affects all of us, I guess, as to how you handle this, how everybody handles this. So yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Sharon? Mr. Glenn?
Yeah, so I guess the jury's still out on the impact that weather has and on the impact the weather has on how this virus is going to spread. But do you envision perhaps maybe the likelihood of a COVID day becoming part of future forecasting?
I have no idea how that would work. So I don't envision it anytime soon. And I, as you said, I think it's something that they don't really understand either. You know, they were sort of expecting that there's a possibility that, like the flu season, as it gets into fall, that it might, you know, be a time where there's sort of a second wave of this and so forth. But I think it also depends a lot on our behavior. So you see in the southern states that have been hot all along. I have some friends out in Palm Springs in the desert where it's been over 100 degrees and their cases are growing still. So, and maybe for them it's because they're inside more than they are. You know, when it's 100 degrees, you're more likely to be inside in the air conditioning, whereas for us in the winter, we're inside more. But being able to be outside and be spread out, I think, is perhaps making a bit of a difference. You know, as we were talking about feeling fortunate, it's like, you know, we live in a place where it's fairly easy to stay away from folks compared to like living in Brooklyn or Manhattan or something, where if you go out of your apartment, and on the sidewalk, you're immediately surrounded by other people unless there's a lockdown. So, you know, here, I've got my porch that I can set up my office to. I got woods behind my house. I could go for a walk, and even just walking around town, you can avoid people. If you see somebody coming the other way, you can, it's rude, but not anymore. You can cross the street and walk on the other side of the street. And you know, that was even during the worst part of the lockdown. Certainly things have opened up a little bit now.
Thank you.
But I don't know how that would work. I don't know what, you know, when they figure out what the parameters are, as to what makes things worse or better, then you know, maybe we could come up with something. But my hope is they find some solutions with vaccines and treatments before we get to that.
Amen.
Kim?
Sharon, in my email that I sent you, I told you I also enjoyed your program of In the Garden with Charlie.
Me too.
Will that still happen?
It is still happening. They just moved it to Sunday mornings.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
we've been going all along. You can find them online, but it's part of the Sunday morning show now, broadcast now, because they were looking for more things to sort of round out that Sunday morning thing, and they thought gardening was a good fit for a Sunday morning. So that's where it's running this year. But yes, I've been getting together with Charlie. Again, it's weird because, you know, we wear masks while we're setting up just in case we get in that 6-foot bubble while we're getting ourselves set up. But then we drop the mask so that we can speak, but are staying more than 6 feet apart outside. But it's very different from when we used to just sort of be shoulder to shoulder doing things. But we're getting it done because I think a lot of people are gardening this year, especially in the spring when things were really sort of locked down. A lot of people started plants for something to do and are getting into their gardens this summer. So yep, we're doing it.
Any other questions for Sharon? Did you have one, Kevin? No? Okay. Sharon, can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Thank
My
you very much.
pleasure.
And
Good to see you
yeah,
all.
we will see you tonight on the air or from your house, I guess, maybe, right?
Yes, you will. Dan is actually on vacation this week, so I'm on 5 to 7 tonight.
All right. Once again, Sharon Meyer, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Be
Now
well.
get outside and enjoy this beautiful sunshine.
I know. I know. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.